it was that you were in love with? It sounds more like her.
Her? That's ridiculous.
Do not bring me into this.
Knock it off!
What? Just never noticed how black your eyes were.
They were replaced by my father as a method of torture.
He picked a pretty set.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel dropped a brand new Guardians of the Galaxy 3 trailer. There's a whole bunch of new footage and Easter eggs, so we'll break it all down. I know lots of theories about how they're going to end the movie because this is meant to be the last time the Guardians of the Galaxy team in this current form rides together. Of course, I'll do videos for all the other Super Bowl trailers. They even dropped a second brand new Flash trailer with totally different footage. I'll do a video for that too. It'll probably take me the next couple of days to get through them all. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. I'm also allowed to post my Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania review on Tuesday, so look out for that. But the big thing in this trailer is obviously the Guardians going up against the High Evolutionary. He's meant to be the person who created Rocket, like Rocket's bad space dad. Most of the Guardians movies revolve around bad space dads. Thanos, then Ego the Living Planet, all terrible fathers, now High Evolutionary. Couple big changes from his comic book backstory that I'll explain as we go through the trailer. But the brand new song that they play on this trailer is Since You've Been Gone by Rainbow. They actually used some Rainbow when they were promoting Thor Love and Thunder, like a lot of classic rock and roll songs in Marvel movies now. But James Gunn is using this song in particular because it's a metaphor for the Guardians being gone for so long, like we're back finally, one last ride. And because Gamora has been gone for so long, like Peter Quill is so bummed out at the beginning of the trailer. But charting the timeline of Marvel movies, just how long has it actually been? It's only been a little while since the events of Thor Love and Thunder, and this is a Marvel Phase 5 movie. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania takes place a little bit before it. At the beginning of the trailer, Rocket comes to talk to Peter Quill, who's getting drunk on space booze. Not really sure what the label says here. There might be a couple minor Easter eggs in the background. A lot of the t-shirts that Peter Quill wears are also advertisements for space candy, like candy that James Gunn will invent that they'll sell around the universe that he buys. There's a quick montage of action scenes from different parts of the movie, the beginning, the end of the movie, when everything goes crazy. This scene of them slow walking together that was at the end of the first trailer seems like it's from the end of the movie. And it's in the High Evolutionary's base, maybe on Counter-Earth. It's hard to tell where exactly his actual base is, because there are a couple locations that they travel to in the movie. He narrates a quick backstory for the Guardians of the Galaxy in general, because it's meant to be the final movie, so he's like, this is what we've done so far, these are all the things we've accomplished together. And they have that joke about what happened with Gamora, like now she's a completely different person because it's the Gamora from 2014 that came forward to the future and then took off. And the reason why she seems like such an asshole to him, why she doesn't care as much about him, is because she didn't experience any of the things the original Gamora did, starting with the events of the first Guardians movie. And that was the movie where she started to develop a relationship with him. But when the movie picks up, the whole idea is that that version of Gamora took off after Avengers Endgame. There was a deleted scene where you actually see her literally walk off while they're all taking a knee for Tony Stark. Like all the other Avengers, everyone that's there is paying homage to him, and Gamora's like, who the hell is Tony Stark? Who's Iron Man? And it just takes off. And at some point after that, she took over what remained of the Ravagers group. And she's just been kind of like a softer version of Thanos lording over the Ravagers since then. Like a more hardcore version of the character. All of these scenes with their funny reunion where she's just knocking him around seem like it's pretty early in the movie after he finds out that she's the new leader of the Ravagers. I think the way they played it in the movie, it's meant to be a big surprise for him, like, wait, what? It's Gamora, the person I've been looking for this whole time. When they're joking inside this alien facility, it's hard to tell what's happening during this part of the movie because it almost seems like it's meant to mirror them being in prison during the first movie, but they're wearing orange jumpsuits instead, and it might just be a research facility. I don't know if they're actually prisoners here. The other funny Easter egg for the first movie is that he's holding the orb there while they're talking about the events of the first movie. Remember, in that first movie, the Power Stone was inside an orb, so there's probably lots of references to all the other Guardians of the Galaxy movies and all their other adventures. This wooden-looking Marvel Studios logo, if you couldn't tell, like the wide version of it, is meant to be a reference to Peter Quill's tape player from the first movie. That ship wound up being destroyed, but obviously, like I said, they're referencing things from that first movie. When they come up on this planet and Peter Quill looks flabbergasted, absolutely surprised, it's meant to be Counter-Earth. So the whole idea with Counter-Earth is that in the comics, Herbert Wyndham starts out as this normal scientist and wants to perfect himself and winds up turning himself into the High Evolutionary through experiments. His whole thing is that he wants to create the perfect being, the perfect race, and he feels like our version of Earth, like the normal Earth that he came from, isn't enough, so he winds up creating Counter-Earth as a sort of place for him to experiment with that idea. So that the Avengers, other superpowered beings, couldn't just see it with the naked eye, like, wait a minute, there's another planet that looks just like Earth, what's going on here? And on Counter-Earth, his big thing was experimenting with human-animal hybrids, which is where we get to the Adam Warlock backstory. There's like a big intersection with Adam Warlock and the High Evolutionary, because in the comics, the High Evolutionary is the one that gave him the Soul Stone. Now, he does have a gem in his forehead in this movie, but obviously it's not the Soul Stone because Thanos atomized those. But when they go to Counter-Earth, that's why it looks exactly like Earth, like this creepy version of Earth with a bunch of human-animal hybrids. A lot of these will probably be references to the comic book versions of the characters. This actually looks like Rocket's actual origin story. Like as they're walking around this chamber here in the center, you see like a version of Rocket that's slowly being experimented on so that he can talk and he can walk on 2 legs. This seems like the High Evolutionary's home base. Like a lot of the action scenes take place here, a lot of the debris, the big fight scenes that they have. It's hard to tell if this is near the giant space butt that they travel to in the other trailer. Like there's this giant scene that looks like a giant celestial-size space anus. That's part of the joke of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Like, you have a Celestial's head of nowhere, which they actually own now. They bought that from the collector during the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. We had a Celestial head. There's a dead Celestial sticking out of the Indian Ocean on Earth currently. Now we have a giant Celestial asshole. This is the first time we've seen the High Evolutionary without his comic book armor on, like he's wearing more casual clothing. He already looks a little bit different from the comics, like he wears red armor in the comics and he has a faceplate. But the reason why he wears that, the reason why his face is covered in the comics, is because it's been so twisted because of all of his experiments. You see him use his powers a little bit later in the trailer, like he's floating down the hallway. He has all kinds of powers in the comics. It's one of those situations where, because he's trying to evolve himself, thus the name High Evolutionary, he continues to give himself more and more powers over time, making himself more powerful. This is another version of Rocket's origin story, tiny baby Rocket getting terrified. The way that James Gunn talks about the character, he was totally happy to just exist as a normal raccoon. He did not want to be turned into what he is now. Even though he's done all these great things, he's had all these great adventures, made all these great friends and family, he's still really bitter about what the High Evolutionary did to him. In Rocket's whole speech here, I think is meant to be a metaphor for just the general themes of the movie itself. When he says the High Evolutionary didn't want to make things perfect, he just hated the way that things were. The whole message is meant to be, you're perfect the way you are, you don't need to change yourself. In the way that all the movies have very broad themes. The knife and the number are references to Rocket's experiment number, like he was just referred to as a number by High Evolutionary. You actually see an Easter egg for that in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie when they do the big lineup and they show you his entire backstory. The Half-World Easter egg is where Rocket is from in the comics. In the comics, his backstory was completely different. Maybe they'll have some Easter eggs for Half-World during this movie. Couple big action scenes, especially with Nebula. They show you that she's gotten a couple new weapons too, like she heats up this blade that she shoots out of her arm. This scene of them in the spacesuits, everybody keeps asking about, is this a reference to Among Us, because they look kind of like the characters from Among Us, or is it a reference to the colors of the Infinity Stones because they're all the different colors of the Infinity Stones? What James Gunn actually revealed is that all these different suits are meant to be a reference to 2001 Space Odyssey, like they're not meant to be an Among Us reference, and they're not a reference to the Infinity Stones. This giant space anus that they're traveling to either belong to a huge creature, or it is part of a celestial, like a dead celestial that the High Evolutionary is experimenting on, which is an idea that I like more, like the whole idea that the High Evolutionary would love to get his hands on more celestial tech. Celestials are meant to be the most powerful beings in the universe next to other cosmic characters, with a few exceptions. There are a couple of characters that are a little bit more powerful than the Celestials, but not that many. So characters like Kang, for instance, have celestial symbols on his technology in all the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania trailers. Of course, Kang would also want to use celestial tech because it is the most advanced tech. The High Evolutionary would try to do the same thing if he could. These are just more scenes of the Guardians of the Galaxy versus the High Evolutionary in his home base. Most of the big action scenes later in the movie seem like they take place here. We see Kraglin wearing Yondu's fin and holding his arrow in front of him. He's been slowly getting better and better with the arrow over time. Like when he first got it, he was terrible, then he got a little bit better by the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. I think the idea is that now he can actually use it pretty decently. Usually they use Kraglin for jokes though, so there'll probably be some comedy behind that. Big reminder that Kraglin is also played by James Gunn's real-life brother, who's also the stand-in on set for Rocket because Bradley Cooper only does the voice. We get a very ominous voiceover from Drax where he makes it sound like he's going to try and sacrifice himself. I did a video recently about how the logos reveal who's going to die at the end of the movie, but it might be a fake out where Rocket just tries to sacrifice himself and then Drax winds up saving him and sacrificing himself. Because Dave Bautista did say that this was going to be his final Marvel movie ever. When the High Evolutionary says incinerate them and he's just wearing his casual clothing, he's probably talking about his other experiments. Like, he might not be talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy. The whole idea is they want to make it seem like he doesn't care about any of his creations, like they are literally just experiments to him. We get a bunch of new Adam Warlock footage. We see him flying across a bunch of debris. He has a bunch of comic book powers. I don't know how many of his comic book powers they're going to give the movie version of the character. He is meant to be one of the most powerful Marvel characters, though. James Gunn also confirmed a lot of my theories in that they're playing the character in this movie a little bit the way they played Vision in Avengers Age of Ultron, born yesterday, like all those kinds of jokes. Like, he's basically a baby who was just born, so he doesn't really understand people that much. And a lot of his arc in the movie is meant to flow with the themes of his original comic book origin story, where he was originally created to be a weapon and then slowly learns over time to figure things out on his own and kind of balances out. Usually when people think of the character, they think of him as being a good character, but he's gone both ways, and there's the whole Mage's personality. I'm not expecting them to do a whole lot of Mage's stuff in the Marvel movies, at least right now, but they could always do that in the future. In the comics, he was created by a separate group on Earth, but eventually he left them and just traveled the galaxy trying to learn new things, just learning about cultures, people, society. Those travels took him to the High Evolutionary's counter-Earth, where High Evolutionary formed a bargain with him to help get rid of Man-Beast, which was one of his human-animal hybrid creations that had gone crazy. And as part of that, High Evolutionary upgraded him with the Soul Gem. Also, when Adam Warlock went to counter-Earth to try and deal with Man-Beast, the people that were living there that he was trying to save gave him the name Adam. Initially, it was meant to be a biblical reference, like the biblical Adam. There's not a lot of religion in Marvel movies, so I don't know how they're going to explain the Adam Warlock in this movie, but I think that they're just going to have one of the Guardians characters give him the name. Groot versus Adam Warlock. This is a reunion scene between Rocket and Lila, who was his girlfriend in the comic. She's meant to be another one of the High Evolutionary's experiments, just like him. Really cool scene of Groot hulking out with Star-Lord going crazy at the High Evolutionary's base. I don't know if he's going to get any bigger, like any taller, so to speak. James Gunn explained he's meant to be kind of like the son of the original Groot. So like the original Groot isn't coming back. This isn't meant to be like him being reborn into a new body. This Groot is meant to have a completely different personality from the Groot in the first Guardians movie. Also kind of seems like he's addicted to video games. Really love the classic Game Boy Easter egg in the holiday special too. Speaking of which, it'll be funny to see if they address Rocket having Winter Soldier's arm, because Sebastian Stan also talked about that in real life. He's like, well, I guess Winter Soldier's probably going to get a new arm at some point. That might be him giving away a spoiler for the Thunderbolts movie. They might actually give him a totally different arm, but I'm not expecting it. There's a little bit of Cosmo footage. She was featured during the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special because she's a much bigger character during the movie. She was in the first Guardians movie as an Easter egg, but only briefly. In the comics, she's based on Laika, the Russian space dog, but in the Marvel universe, she was shot into space by the Russians as an experiment and then wound up traveling to nowhere and got bombarded with these cosmic rays that gave her the special abilities that she has. The reason why she can talk isn't because she can move her lips. She basically beams her thoughts into other people's heads telepathically.
What?
I refuse to do any more work while you demean me.
All right. I'm sorry.
It seems like they want to show Star-Lord slowly winning Gamora over. I don't know if that's going to happen by the end of the movie because I don't think either one of them are going to die. The new fuzzy character beneath them that they're protecting is just named Blurp. He's meant to be like Rocket, like one of the other High Evolutionary's experiments. This scene of Rocket fighting on top of Groot's shoulder obviously meant to be a reference to them doing the exact same thing in the first Guardians movie. Drax versus Adam Warlock using two energy swords or two energy weapons. He might have one of Adam Warlock's weapons, like these might be two of his weapons and Drax just stole one of them. If Drax is going to die in this movie, I would not be surprised if Adam Warlock winds up being the one to kill him, but it always could be something else at the end of the movie, because I think part of the arc of the film is that Adam Warlock fights them in the beginning, and then like in the comics, he slowly starts to figure out that they're not so terrible and winds up helping them by the end. And I said this in my video for the last big trailer for the movie, but the Guardians are wearing their comic book accurate Guardians of the Galaxy uniforms too, from the Annihilation Conquest run, where Adam Warlock actually wound up joining the Guardians of the Galaxy team. So it is always possible that at the end of the movie, or like in the next Guardians of the Galaxy adventure, Adam Warlock is on that roster. There's a big montage of them just going out in blazes of glory all over the place, like they want to make you wonder if anybody's going to make it out of this film alive, but I genuinely think only like one or two characters are actually going to die. This funnier scene of them slow walking with Nebula holding Peter Quill is actually on Nowhere. Remember, they own that as of the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. Then this funny tag scene at the end of the trailer with Gamora and Nebula is meant to be a mirror for Thor and Star-Lord during Thor Love and Thunder, where Thor started to lean in and Star-Lord was like, no dude, I'm not talking about me, stop doing that, that's weird.
Not me.
What? Just listening.
Knock it off!
What? Just never noticed how black your eyes were.
Where Star-Lord does basically the same thing with Nebula. Like, Gamora's joking that he's more in love with her, and he kind of thinks about it for a minute like, wait a minute, maybe I am in love with Nebula. I never thought about it that way. The funny thing about Nebula that James Gunn revealed is that when they were making the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie and Karen Gillan was kind of developing the Nebula character, like the way she speaks, the way she acts, they were having trouble finding something that they really liked. So James Gunn had her perform the character as if she was kind of like a sassy version of Marilyn Monroe, which is something that you cannot unsee. Anytime you hear Nebula speak now, you just hear Marilyn Monroe's voice, like a slightly stabbier version of Marilyn Monroe.
Don't worry about me. I'm only concerned about you two. It's a wonderful moon out tonight.
Thanks, Dad. Sounds fair. This is one fight you won't win.
The big thing, though, is that even though this is meant to be the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie with this particular roster, that doesn't mean it'll be the last Guardians movie ever, or the last time you see the Guardians of the Galaxy in any of the movies. For instance, Sylvester Stallone's Starhawk character, who's on that original Guardians team, like the Guardians 3000 team, he's also supposed to be in the movie. I don't know how many of the other classic Guardians are in there too. But it's one of those ideas that you see these space teams pop up in different space movies all the time. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of references to the Guardians in the Marvels movie because that'll be taking place a lot in Kree Skrull space, I think, or at least reference a lot of what's happening in that part of space. And there are talks about them doing a Nova Disney Plus series or a one-off special presentation, kind of like they did for Werewolf by Night. That would be much more connected to the Guardians mythology because they very literally spent a lot of time with the Nova Corps. But the whole idea is that after the movie comes out, James Gunn is officially, like, permanently moving over to DC and not really going to be involved with any future Marvel productions as far as I know. He's kind of half and half right now. Like, he just released his big reboot trailer. I've already done a couple videos for that, so I'll release it in the comments below. But like I said, a bunch of other big Super Bowl trailers just released. I'll do videos for everything. It'll probably take me a couple days to get everything out. They also released like a second additional Flash trailer with even more brand new footage, so I'll do a video for that as well. You can click here for that brand new Flash Super Bowl trailer video, whole bunch of Easter eggs, and click here for all my other Super Bowl trailers. I'll update the link as soon as I post those. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.